Okay, now this is a pre-recorded lecture to cover the chapter 10 on performance measurement in private sector organizations. So first we'll have a look at session objectives. At the end of this session, you should be able to apply financial performance indicators in the business sector organizations, then explain issues relating to use of financial performance indicators as a mode of measuring performance. Then finally, apply non-financial performance indicators to measure the performance of business organizations. So you'll be tested for your final paper, you will be tested up to performance measurement. So accordingly, I advise you to carefully study this part as well. So I'll give a brief overview about this particular chapter, not in lengthy discussion as a guidance. So you can study the slides, but basically important area will be covered during this uh, brief video recording. So as an approach, we'll see what is performance measurement, why it is important for a business. I think when you study management for your degree program, under management you study every business organization, they do have their business objectives, their purpose, goals and objectives, vision, mission, right? So no business organization can survive in the world without having a purpose. So once you identify your purpose, you need to identify what are the areas you need to perform well. Let's say your organization's objective is to maximize profit or maximize shareholders' wealth. So that's the by most of the cases the objective for a business organization. So if you have set your organization objective, let's say to maximize profit, then you need to identify, depending on nature of the business and the industry, you need to identify what are the important area you need to perform well. So business factors or the areas that are important for a business organization's success are usually known as critical success factors. Now, as far as the university is concerned, it is not a business organization. It's a not-for-profit organization, let's say. So, as far as the university is concerned, its main success factors are teaching and learning and research, right? Universities engage in a lot of other activities as well. They engage in administrative activities and cleaning activities and environmental activities, uh, maintenance activities, maintenance of security service, right? So a lot of activities are there. But as far as the university, the key objective is concerned, its main area is teaching, learning, and research activities. So accordingly, if we want to ensure that we are performing well as far as these key areas or critical success factors are concerned, we need to measure its performance. Otherwise, we cannot ensure whether we are doing the right things, whether we are going on the correct path. So once accordingly, once you identify your goals and objectives, then you need to identify what are the important areas or the factors that are crucially affect your business success. So those are the critical success factors. Once you identify your critical success factors, you need to keep tracking, keep measuring how well you are performing with these factors. For that purpose, we need to uh, establish key performance indicators. Key performance indicators. Now, according, there are three things that are interrelated: organizational goals and objectives. Every business organizations must have their goals and objectives. Then they need to identify what are the critical areas we need to perform well. We need to perform well. Then you need to keep measuring the performance of these factors to ensure whether you are doing well with these factors. For that purpose, we establish key performance indicators. So key performance indicators can be defined as the is a kind of measurement of the critical success factors, or the measurements or indicators about the degree of achievements of your critical success factors can be considered as key performance indicators. For a business, let's say objective is to maximize profit. So one of the critical success factors may be to increase market share, increase customer base, increase corporate image, right? So, and increase the enhance the creativity, enhance the innovation, uh, enhance the productivity. So these may be the critical success factors depending on the nature of the industry or the business. Critical success factors for many business organizations. As far as the university types of business, non-profit organization is concerned, its critical success factors may be teaching, learning, and research activities. So once you identify these critical success factors, then we need to establish key performance indicators. For a business, we can say increase in market share, sales growth, right? Business organization, if they are willing to maximize profit, to be the market leader, so uh, we can use sales growth as an indicator to measure the performance. We can say gross profit margin as an indicator to measure the performance. We can say number of customers repeat in the organizations as a performance measurement, KPI, or number of new patented products, number of newly introduced products and services to the market. So these can be considered as some KPIs for a business depending on the nature of the business, right? So accordingly, there's a direct relationship between the organizational goals and objectives. Then essential or the key fundamental areas that are fundamental for the business success, those are critical success factors. Then once we establish or identify critical success factors, you need to develop or establish some performance indicators to measure the degree of achievements of your critical success factors. They are called key performance indicators. So accordingly, in management, you have studied the relationship between these goals and objectives, success factors, and performance indicators. Right. So according in this chapter, we are going to discuss how management accounting information can be used to measure the organizational performance. Okay. Right. So accordingly, there are two approaches to measure organizational performance: financial performance and non-financial performance. So we can use financial performance indicators to measure the performance. At the same time, we can use non-financial uh, performance indicators to measure the organizational performance. So as far as the history of these performance measurement indicators are concerned, financial performance indicators are considered as very conventional and traditional method of measuring performance. So accordingly, ව්‍යාපාරික කාර්යඵල මැනීමේදී මේ financial performance measurement method එක අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් සලකනවා බොහොම traditional method එකක් කියලා. ඊට අමතරව දැන් උදාහරණයකට gross margin, net profit margin, sales growth, return on investment, return on equity, asset turnover. So these are the traditional financial performance indicators that are usually using accounting ratios or financial statement analysis. By using financial statement analysis, we can develop some financial performance indicators that can be used to measure the organizational performance. Usually, these financial performance indicators are not adequate to measure the overall success of a business. So, we need to look at non-financial performance indicators as well, because we know financial statements or financial statement analysis only concern about the information available in the financial statements. So anyway, we will first discuss financial performance indicators. Thereafter, we'll see the importance of non-financial performance indicators. Okay. So financial statement analysis. Um, it's a kind of very lengthy or the descriptive or the very important area. It's a very broad area. For example, financial statement analysis can be is offered as a separate subject for the final year student for BSc Accounting special degree. So financial statement analysis is a very broad area, but here we will limit our uh, concept financial statement analysis just to apply ratio analysis with the general purpose financial statements. That means using the financial statements or the components of financial statements that are generally found in the published financial statement, that is income statement, statement of financial position, cash flow statement, statement of changes in equity, and notes to the account. So with these components of financial statements, by using the information available inside these financial statements, we can analyze the entity's financial performance. So main purpose of financial statement analysis is usually to identify financial strengths and financial weaknesses. So we can use financial statement analysis to identify financial strengths and financial weaknesses or the financial healthiness um, by using information available in the financial statements with other supporting information that you can collect from other sources of information. Okay, so there are different approaches to financial statement analysis. So accordingly, now we are talking about financial statement analysis. For what purpose? To use financial performance indicators. So to generate financial performance indicators to measure the performance. So financial statement analysis is a very broad subject. There are different approaches, there are different techniques, or there are different tools of analyzing financial statements. So one of the very popular and most commonly applied tool to analyze financial statements is ratio analysis. In addition, there are some other approach, other tools, common size financial statement analysis or the horizontal or trend analysis. There are different tools. So we are not going to discuss common size financial statement analysis. That is usually uh, for example, using the balance sheet. So balance sheet can be converted into common size based on the total asset. Based on total asset, all the line item size plot as a percentage of total asset. Then uh, size disparity size eliminated, or two different companies, all the assets items are expressed as a percentage of the total assets. So accordingly, size difference is eliminated. So all the figures are expressed as a percentage of total asset. As far as income statement is concerned, all the income statement items are expressed as a percentage of sales. Sales is a sales, cost of sale as a percentage of sales we can express as a percentage. Then gross profit as a percentage. Admin expenses and distribution, finance cost, taxation, all the income statement line items can be expressed as a percentage of total sales. So accordingly, if you take two different business organization, their size difference is eliminated. Why? All the items are expressed as a percentage. So big company and small company can be compared because size disparities eliminated. But don't worry about this common size financial statement analysis and horizontal or trend analysis. We are not going to discuss, and you are not supposed to study or concern about these things. So according to our start, as far as financial performance indicators are concerned, that means as far as these financial performance indicators are concerned, our analysis or our discussion is limited only for ratio analysis. Now, as far as the ratio analysis is concerned, you are very familiar with some of the key ratios because you have studied these ratios for even for your advanced level. right? So what is meant by a ratio? So we are not going to take time to discuss ratio analysis because you have the basic idea. But here we are not our main concern is not to discuss how to calculate, because calculation part of ratio is not that important, because with modern days, so with modern computerized accounting system and ERP system, all the ratios are freely generated. They are automatically generated. Actually, ratio calculation is not a big deal because it is generated automatically from the system. What is important is to analyze. What is important is to interpret the ratios generated by the system. So accordingly, in our discussion, we are not going to that concern about the calculation part. Instead, to understand, right? For example, once the ratio is calculated, so what we should be able to interpret it. What this ratio tells you, or what is the symptoms of these ratios change over the period, right? So accordingly, calculation part is not that important, Lamai, most of, because nowadays all the ratios are automatically calculated. Anyway, what is meant by a ratio? Ratio is expressing one number in relation to another, in relation to another number. So in the financial statement, there are a lot of line items, right? So accordingly, with the ratio analysis, we are going to develop meaningful relationship between two numbers. We can develop meaningful relationship between two numbers. Then we are going to observe what has happened to that relationship over the period. Let's say we can develop a relationship between gross profit and sales figures. So gross profit is the income statement line item, right? Then sales is the income statement top line item. Sales, then cost of sales, then gross profit. So we can develop a relationship between sales line item and gross profit line item. We can, for example, we can divide gross profit by sales. Then it is a ratio. So once you develop this ratio, what we are going to do, right? You don't just leave that ratio, right? Just computing ratios has no meaning. Once you compute that ratio, we wait and see with the prior period ratios. We compute for the current period this ratio, and we can compare this ratio with the prior period ratio, and we can see how the ratio has changed over the period. Or else you can compare this ratio with your industry average ratios. Let's say industry average information is available with the central bank reports or the annual reports. We can compare our gross margin with the industry average gross margin. Or else you can compare your gross profit ratio with your industry competitors, key competitors ratios. Then we can have an idea or the assessment about our financial performance, right? So accordingly, ratio analysis. With ratio analysis, what we are usually doing, we develop meaningful relationship between two numbers. And we observe this number. We compare this number with the prior period information, or with the industry average information, or with the, let's say, budgeted information, and see how we have performed during the period, right? So accordingly, ratio analysis is usually considered as one of the most popular tool of analyzing financial statement, right? So accordingly, we'll now see what are the types of ratios. So there are different ways of classifying these accounting ratios. Actually, most popular uh, classification of accounting ratios are profitability, liquidity, gearing, then activity ratios or efficiency ratios, and then market ratios or investors ratios. So popularly, there are five categories of ratios. But in this chapter, we are using three types of ratios. Three types of ratios. Profitability, liquidity, and gearing. So according, these are the types of ratios we discuss. With the profitability ratios, we measure the how profitable the company, how well the entity has performed over the period. With the liquidity, we are going to assess the entity's short-term liquidity position, short-term financial position, the entity's ability or the business ability to pay for the short-term debt obligation when they become due. With the leverage or risk ratios, we are going to assess the long-term financial position, right? In addition, right, we can discuss other activity ratios or efficiency ratios like stock turnover, debtors turnover, or the collection period or payments period. Those ratios can be computed, right? So accordingly, uh, we are going to discuss financial performance indicators with financial statement analysis. There we use accounting ratio analysis. So in the accounting ratio analysis, there are three main types of ratios we are going to discuss. So profitability. So with the profitability ratios, its primary objective is to um, primary concern is to measure how well the entity has performed during the period. A prime objective of any business is to maximize profit, that you know. Actually, there are different objective classifications, financial objective of firms or non-financial objectives. As far as the financial objectives are concerned, there are two popular financial objectives: profit maximizing profitability or maximizing shareholders' wealth. I think the most powerful objective of a business is to maximizing shareholders' wealth, maximizing shareholders' wealth. But ordinary people are very familiar with these profitability objectives, right? So usually maximizing shareholder wealth objective is superior than maximizing profitability because profitability has some limitations, drawbacks. So we will discuss them later. So anyway, ordinary person ordinary person can easily understand the objective of a business is to maximize profit, right? So if the objective is to maximize profit, we should be able to measure, right, whether how well we have um, achieved the profitability, whether our profitability is adequate or whether it is sufficient to realize your shareholders' objectives, right? So we need to keep keep measuring profitability and to ensure we are uh, we are doing well with the profitability and we can achieve the long term shareholders expectation, right? So according, when it comes to profitability measurements, there are different alternative um, ratio calculation. There are different types of profitability ratios, right? So you are very familiar with these ratios. For example, gross profit margin, net profit margin, return on capital employed, then asset turnover. Asset turnover sometimes can be considered as efficiency ratios as well. But basically, the top three ratios are basically it directly measure the entity's profitability. Asset turnover, according to, we are not going to discuss, according to a DuPont analysis, asset turnover directly affect the entity's profitability, right? So we're not going to talk about the concept of DuPont analysis, don't worry. But all these ratios directly relating to entity's profitability. So as far as gross profit margin is concerned, you are all familiar how to compute gross profit divided by sales. So both gross profit and sales turnover, these information can be taken from the statement of profit or loss. Sales turnover is the top line item and gross margin is the usually third line item. You can take the gross profit and divide by the sales turnover and develop a relationship. So that is the gross profit margin. So important thing, not the calculation. As I told you earlier, computation of gross profit ratio is not a big deal. It's a very simple thing. Even grade 5 student can calculate this ratio if he is given this basic information. So what is important is to analyze and interpret. Right? For example, now let's say if you compare to prior period, let's say current period gross profit ratio is has dropped. Let's say prior period gross margin is 42%. Current period gross margin has dropped to 37%. It's a significant drop, huge drop. Prior period 42%, current period 37%. So according, you should be able to um, advise the management what are the possible reasons. What are the possible reasons? So what are the factors that affect the gross margin to drops? Or how we can advise the management to increase the gross margin, right? So accordingly, I again emphasize what is important is not to calculate the gross margin, because gross profit margin calculation automatically happen. It's automatically calculated by the ERP system. It is automatically calculated by the computerized system, right? So once the ratio is calculated and once you identify the adverse deviation, then you should be able to identify the reason and advise the strategy, right? So accordingly, you know how to compute gross profit divided by sales. Then you can compare that ratio with the prior period gross margin and see whether we have performed well during the current period. Usually, among all the gross profit ratios, higher the ratio is preferred. So according current period ratio, if it is greater than prior period ratio, then we can consider it as a positive thing. All the gross margins, gross profit ratios, and all the profitable ratios, right? Usually, increase is better. That means improvement in the gross profit ratios or the net profit ratios or return on capital employed, so whatever the profitable ratio, increase is better. Higher the ratio is better. So according, if the ratio has increased, it is a good sign about the profitability, right? So again, I emphasize what is important is not to calculate. Once the ratio is calculated, you should be able to compare it and identify the deviation. If there's a negative deviation, adverse uh, deviation, let's say if the gross margin has dropped, you should be able to analyze what are the possible reasons. What could be the reason to drop gross profit ratio? Right? It may be sometime decrease in selling price, right? When the selling price decrease, gross profit ratio decrease, or it may be due to increase in production cost. Production cost increase, gross profit margin decrease, or maybe due to this foreign exchange rate prices. Our import raw material cost might increase. So accordingly, it might increase production cost and gross margin might decrease. So accordingly, you should be able to identify the reason for adverse deviations or the adverse ratios if you have noticed. At the same time, once you identify the adverse ratios or adverse scenarios, you should be able to advise what are the strategies business can adopt. For example, let's say current year gross margin has dropped due to some other reason. Then you might be asked, so what, right? Your top management might ask you to give some suggestions to increase your gross profit ratios. So how you can increase the gross profit ratio, right? By increasing sales volume, you can't increase gross margin. ඉතා වැදගත් මතක් තියන්න. දැන් sales volume වැඩි කරාට කවදාවත් gross profit margin එක වැඩි වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ කියන්නේ sales unit 100ක් විකුණනවා වෙනුවට 1000ක් විකුණනවා කියලා gross margin එක වැඩි වෙන්නේ. Gross profit rupee value එක වැඩි වෙනවා. So if you want to increase gross margin වැඩි කරන්න නම් අපිට ක්‍රම දෙකක් තියෙනවා. එකක් තමයි broad sense ක්‍රම දෙකක් තියෙනවා. එකක් තමයි selling price එක වැඩි කිරීම. But some it is possible. I think it will increase your gross margin. හැබැයි ප්‍රශ්නේ තමයි if you are working in a competitive business environment, increasing price might not be that easy, that possible. අපි computer market environment එක price එක වැඩි කරපුවම quantity demand drop වෙනවා. ඒකේ negative consequences තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. Anyway, increase in selling price, definitely, assuming other factors remain say constant, it will definitely increase your gross profit margin. On the other hand, the other best approach is that is very cool thing if you can do that is to minimize your cost of sale, to minimize your production cost, right? Because cost can be managed by yourself, cost under your management. So sales revenue is not under your management because sales revenue is a function of P times Q, price වැඩි කිරීම, quantity. Price is determined by the market. In a perfect market environment, perfectly computed market environment, price is set by the market. Quantity is decided by the customer. So P times Q is the revenue. Revenue is decided by right outside forces. But as far as cost is concerned, cost is under your control. You can manage cost. You can negotiate with your suppliers. You can change your production method, production system, business processes. You can improve, so you can influence your production costs. So accordingly, you can uh, seek for cheap raw material. Uh, then you can negotiate with the suppliers and quantity discounts and high quality some raw materials, right? With these strategies, you can increase your gross margin. There are some other studies as well. So accordingly, ratio computation is not that important at this level, right? As a university student, ratio calculation කරන එක ඉගෙන ගන්න උවමනාවක් නැහැ. එක basic knowledge that you have already have that knowledge, right? Important thing is to analyzing, interpreting and giving suggestion. right? එනිසා ratio calculation අපි කතා කරන්න අපිට අවශ්‍ය වන්නේ ratio එක interpret කිරීම. ඒකට වැඩි අවධානය යොමු කරන්න. Then net profit margin, right? There are different forms of different types of net profit line items. You know, profit before interest and tax is also profit. At the same time, there is a profit after tax, right? It's all right. There are different versions of net profit margin. The one ratio is earning before interest and tax. That means profit before interest and tax divided by again sales turnover. Sales turnover, income statement line item, earning before interest and tax. So profit before interest and tax again it is taken from the income statement, separate line item. So you develop the relationship between these two line items and observe. We compare with the prior period information, computers information, budgeted information and see what has happened to our net profit, whether profit has positively changed or negatively changed, or right, what are the accordingly corrective actions we can take. Right. So there are different versions of net profit margin. මේ දෙකේ මේ ක්‍රම දෙකට compute කරොත් අපිට ලැබෙන්නේ definitely two different ratios. For these ratios, there are no standards, so there are no hard and fast rule. You can develop net profit ratio as you wish, depending on your requirement. Depending on your requirement, you can compute the net profit margin either by dividing EBIT by sales turnover or profit after tax by sales turnover. Right. For example, if you want to measure the profitability that relates to shareholders' return, then you better take profit after tax. And if you want to, let's say, measure the uh, business managers or the executive managers performance, you can take profit before interest and tax divided by sales turnover, because profit after tax ගත්තට එතරම් suitable නොවෙන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද tax එක interest එක sometime especially tax එක management එකට directly control කිරීමේ හැකියාව නොතිබෙන්න පුළුවන්. We know all the cost and expenses can be controlled by the management, but if you want to, usually if the entity wants to measure the management performance, we usually take profit before or earnings before interest and tax divided by sales turnover. If you wish, you can take profit after tax divided by sales turnover. Two different ratios, two different answers in it. You can take whatever the ratios as far as it is meaningful and it is relevant for your required analysis. Okay, so again, higher the net profit margin is usually preferred. Higher the net profit margin represent company has performed well. So you can compare your current period uh, net profit margin with the prior period result or the computed result or your budgeted information or the industry average information, and then you can make an analysis. Sometimes company may have a, let's say, attractive sufficient or the attractive gross margin which is above the industry average, but when it comes to net margin, strange thing happens. Let's say as far as gross margin is concerned, company has achieved a very attractive gross margin, which is above the industry average. But when it comes to net margin, let's say net margin, right, computed profit after tax base, right? Profit after tax එක මත compute කරන ලද net margin එක ඒක very it has decreased. Gross margin has increased during the period, but when it comes to net margin has decreased during the period. Is it possible? Possible. So what could be the reason? Reason could be that means production managers and marketing managers, they have done their business well. Production managers have reduced the cost of sales or the production cost or the cost of sale, and marketing managers, they have uh, done their sales and distribution jobs very well, very competitively. As a result, sales income increase, cost of sale drop. Then entity, let's say, maintain very attractive gross margin. But net profit margin, when it comes to net margin might drop. So what is the difference or what are the line items you find between gross margin and net margin? So those are the factors that affect the difference. From gross margin to net margin, we have what we have. We have administrative expense. We have sales and distribution expense. We have finance cost. We have taxation. So according, these are the factors that affect the difference between gross margin and net margin. If the net margin has adversely dropped when gross margin has improved, it could be due to our inefficiency, right? We have lack of management in our admin expense or the administrative inefficiencies, increase in unnecessary expenses, or increase in government taxation, or maybe due to increasing additional leverage or additional debt capital, right? Due to additional debt capital, let's say we had to increase interest cost, right? So those are the reason. Those could be the reason if there's a huge difference between gross margin and net margin, right? Secondly, if you are asked to advise how to increase net margin, then you can accordingly advise by looking at those additional line items. Then return on capital employed, this ratio, we can again measure the profitability. Here we take the net profit after tax. Usually net profit means here the net profit after tax, or we can take net profit before interest and tax as well, right? Depending on your requirement, because here the return on capital employed, it is better to take net profit before interest and tax, because capital employed include debt capital. So accordingly, we cannot remove interest from the numerator net profit. Net profit එක interest අඩු කරලා net profit එක capital employed වලින් බෙදන්නක suitable නැහැ. So accordingly, uh, we can take net profit before interest and tax divided by capital employed. There are different versions of return on capital employed calculations. So again, calculation part is not that important. Once you calculate, you should be able to interpret. So once you calculate return on capital employed, we can compare that ratio again with the comparative information. So within the average and see whether we have performed well, right? So accordingly, if you want to increase this return on capital employed, there are some strategies. You can suggest all these strategies to increase the gross margin, increase the net margin. All those strategies will increase the return on capital employed. In addition, we can arrange capital structure sometime, right? We are not going to discuss whether capital structure change will affect to uh, net profit or not. Is a big debate. But let's say we have cash surplus. Let's say entity has surplus cash. At the same time, we have long-term debt capital. We have interest-bearing debt capital in our capital structure. At the same time, we have relatively, let's say, unused cash surplus, right? Actually, it is not rational to have cash surplus with holding long-term debt capital. What we can suggest is to, if we have this kind of scenario, we can advise the management use the surplus cash to settle the long-term loan. Or if you have idle asset, let's say we have borrowed bank loan and we have borrowed purchased land and land is utilized, not utilized, or land is underutilized. We have borrowed a huge bank loan and purchased a land and land is just right underutilized. It is used for, let's say, capital appreciation purpose, right? So what we can say, so we can suggest if the land is underutilized or any property is underutilized, we can suggest the management to sell the land, sell the underutilized asset and divest the funds, collect the funds and settle the loan. That will reduce or decrease the burden on your P&L in the form of interest payment. ඒ අනුව අපිට net profit ratio එක වැඩි කරන්න පුළුවන්. උපදෙස් කොහොමද දෙන්න පුළුවන්? අපිට දෙන්න පුළුවන් නියුමරේටර් එක ඉරෙන් උඩ ඉලක්කම වැඩි කරන්න සජෙෂන්ස් දෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේම ඉරෙන් යට තියෙන ඩිනොමිනේටර් එක අඩු කරන්න සජෙෂන්ස් දෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඉරෙන් උඩ තියෙන net profit එක වැඩි කරන්න දෙන්න පුළුවන් සජෙෂන්ස් මොනවද? gross margin එක වැඩි කරන්න දෙන සියලුම සජෙෂන්ස් වලංගු. net profit ratio වැඩි කරන්න දෙන සියලුම සජෙෂන්ස් වලංගු. ඊට අමතරව මේ ඩිනොමිනේටර් එකකින් අපිට කිසියම් ඇඩ්වයිස් එකක් දෙන්න පුළුවන්. උඩ ඉලක්කම ලොකු වෙද්දි රේෂියෝ වැඩි වෙනවා, යට ඉලක්කම පොඩි වෙද්දි රේෂියෝ එක වැඩි වෙනවා. කැපිටල් එම්ප්ලොයිඩ් අඩු කරන්නේ කොහොමද? රයිට්, මම කලින් සඳහන් කළා ව්‍යාපාරයේ බැංකු ලෝන් එකක් අරගෙන කිසියම් වූ බිස්නස් ප්‍රොජෙක්ට් එකකට අපි ඇසට් මිලදීගෙන තියෙනවා. ලොකු ප්‍රොජෙක්ට් අයිඩියා එකක් අරගෙන ඇතුව අපි ලෑන්ඩ් එකක් මිලදී ගත්තා. Due to some other reason, let's say due to recent COVID pandemic, thereafter due to Sri Lankan economic crisis, we could not start the project. අපි බැංකු ලෝන් එක අරගෙන ලෑන්ඩ් එකක් ගත්තා. හැබැයි ප්‍රොජෙක්ට් එක ස්ටාර්ට් කරන්න බෑ. ලෑන්ඩ් එක idle. හැබැයි බැංකු ලෝන් එකට we have to keep paying interest. That interest is a burden to the P&L under finance cost. So what we can suggest to increase the net margin or increase the return on capital employed, right? We can advise the management, okay, sell the idle asset, sell the underutilized asset, sell the underperforming asset, recover the funds and settle the loans. That will decrease the denominator. Denominator එක size එක අඩු වෙනවා. At the same time, net profit එක it increase. Why? There's no interest cost. There's no interest cost. But it won't reduce your operating capacity. Why? Because it is already underutilized asset. ඒ land එක වික්ක කියලා sales අඩු වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ land එක වික්ක කියලා performance අඩු වෙන්නේ නැහැ because underutilized or idle asset, right? So accordingly, we can suggest different approach, different strategies. Then asset turnover. This also links to profitability. Higher the asset turnover, right? It will generate, it will gear up or it will generate, give more opportunity to generate profits, right? Usually asset turnover is efficiency ratios, asset utilization ratios, usually higher the asset turnover ratio, higher the possibility for, higher the opportunity for creating profitability, right? So accordingly, how do we compute uh, turnover? That means the sales turnover from the income statement top line item, and the asset is from the balance sheet. This time is very important. Uh, this ratio takes numerator turnover sales is taken from the income statement. That is prepared for a period. Asset is taken, total asset is taken from the balance sheet. That is prepared as at a particular date. දැන් පොඩි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා මේ ටර්න් එක ගන්න ඉන්කම් ස්ටේට්මන්ට් එකෙන් ඇසට් ගන්න බැලන්ස් ෂීට් එකෙන් මේ රේෂියෝ එකේ නියුමරේටර් එක ඉන්කම් ස්ටේට්මන්ට් ඩිනොමිනේටර් එක ඇසට් බැලන්ස් ෂීට් සාමාන්‍ය ළමයි ඉන්කම් ස්ටේට්මන්ට් ෆිගර් එකක් බැලන්ස් ෂීට් ෆිගර් එකකින් බෙදන විට බැලන්ස් ෂීට් ෆිගර් එකට අපි ගන්නවා ගන්නේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඇවරේජ් එක. ඒ කියන්නේ year beginning එකයි year end එකයි total asset at the beginning, total asset at the end දෙක අරගෙන දෙකේ average එකකින් තමයි මේ income statement figure එක බෙදන්නේ. හේතුව ඔයාලා දන්නවා income statement හදන්නේ කිසියම් 12 months වල period එකකට හදන්නේ. 12 months, 6 months or maybe 3 months, right? Usually income statement for a period, balance sheet is as at a particular date. ඒ අනුව period එක income statement එකේ figure එකක් බෙදනවා නම් balance sheet එකට ගන්නවා සාමාන්‍යයෙන් average figure එක, right? So anyway, you know how to compute the ratios. Once the ratio is computed, um, right, higher the turnover ratio is preferred. So if you again ask advice, what advise some strategies to increase turnover ratio, asset turnover. ළමයි asset turnover ratio එක වැඩි කරන්න දෙන්න පුළුවන් suggestions මොනවද? එකක් තමයි numerator එකකින් suggestions දෙන්න. ඉරෙන් උඩ හරය දිහා බලලා suggestions දෙන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද ඉරෙන් උඩ තියෙන turnover, sales turnover. So we can say, right, uh, undertake sales promotion, sales campaigns ගන්න, sales promotions වලට යන්න. Right, right, market penetration, product market development, market penetration, or undertake competitive sales promotion campaigns and going for new markets, right? We can increase sales turnover. විවිධ marketing campaigns වලින් advertisement වලින් අපි sales turnover එක වැඩි කරන්න පුළුවන් by increasing the product quality, new features වලින් අපි customer product image එක, product branding තුලින් අපිට sales turnover එක වැඩි කරන්න පුළුවන්. Some are short term, some are long term. For example, all sudden you can increase brand loyalty and brand image, right? හැබැයි අපිට short term පුළුවන් sales promotion එකක් කරන promotion campaign එකක් කරලා අපිට පුළුවන් sales turnover වැඩි කරන්න short term. හැබැයි long term අපිට විවිධ අපිට strategies ගන්න පුළුවන්. then denominator එකෙන් අපිට strategies දෙන්න පුළුවන් asset. දැන් මේ ඉලක්කම ලොකු කරන්න නම් අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ ඉරෙන් උඩ ඉලක්කම වැඩි වෙන ආකාර strategies දෙනවා. ඉරෙන් යට ඉලක්කම අඩු වෙන ආකාර strategies අපිට දෙන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙනම් අපිට කරන්න තියෙනවද asset අඩු කිරීම. දැන් ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා asset අඩු කරද්දී මොකද වෙන්නේ? කම්පැනියේ sales capacity අඩු වෙන්න පුළුවන්, operating capacity අඩු වෙන්න පුළුවන්. So it is not good, right? For example, if you have 3 showrooms, you can't ask, right, sell one showroom. Why? If you sell one showroom, if you shut down one production department, production plant, it will decrease your production capacity, it will decrease your sales turnover. We can suggest again, right, divest underutilized and underperforming asset, sell underutilized and underperforming asset. Then that will increase your asset turnover hugely. මේ ඉරෙන් යට denominator එකේ තියෙන underutilized asset, ව්‍යාපාරයේ underutilized වෙන asset තියෙනවා නම් land වෙන්න පුළුවන්, building වෙන්න පුළුවන්, plant, machinery වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒවා ඔක්කොම sell කරලා balance sheet එකේ අපි ඒ asset අයින් කරලා අපි ඒ asset වඩා ඵලදායි asset වල යොදවපුවාම එතුලින් තව sales generate කරන්න පුළුවන්, right? So accordingly, those are the some of the strategies. Right here you can see one of the activities. You can see here you are not required to compute the ratios. So ratios are computed and computed ratios are given. You are just asked to comment about the company's profitability, right? So accordingly, by looking at these ratios, you can say, for example, compared to 2018, you can see gross margin has dropped. 2018, 33.69. When it comes to 2029, or sorry, 2019, let's say, it has dropped from 33.69 to 31.5. It is right considerable drop. Right, drop in gross margin is it's a it's a very significant because it will directly and adversely affect your net margin. Right, if you have the huge fixed operating cost, drop in gross margin will result huge drop in your net profit margin. ඔය gross margin අඩු වෙදී ළමයි ඔයාලගේ fixed operating cost එක එහෙමම තියෙද්දි අපිට අන්තිමේට sacrifice වෙන්නේ erode වෙන්නේ shareholder ඉතුරු වෙන net profit margin එක. හරි, ඒ නිසා gross margin වල drop එකක් අපිට ඉතා වැදගත්. So what could be the reason? Right? So how we can advise the management to increase the gross margin? හරි, ඒතර අපි මේ ගැන තමයි කියන්න තියෙන්නේ. මේක කියන්න පුළුවන් අපිට basically බලලා gross margin has been eroded or decreased compared to 2008 to 2019. 2018 to 2019, you can see year on year basis by how much this gross margin has dropped, right? This kind of calculation is not that important, but it is important to give some interpretation and advices if it is necessary, right? Then next types of ratio, next category of ratio is liquidity ratios, right? I think you may have studied financial management sometime. You may have already studied. Under financial management, Lamai, there are three different types of financial management division: financing division, investment division, and working capital management division. මූල්‍ය කළමනාකරණය තුළ ප්‍රධාන තීරණ තුනක් ගැන. මූල්‍ය කළමනාකරණයේ ප්‍රධානතම අරමුණ තමයි shareholder ගේ wealth එක maximize කිරීම. Financing decisions, investment decisions and working capital management decisions තමයි financial management වල financial manager කෙනෙකුට ගන්න තියෙන ප්‍රධානතම decision තුන. ඒකින් ඔයාලා දැන් පේනවා working capital management කියන්නේ financial management වල එන ප්‍රධානතම right key decision making area, right? With the liquidity ratios, we are going to manage, or we are going to assess entities working capital management. පැහැදිලිද? එතකොට liquidity ratios අපි basically measure කරන්නේ entities short term liquidity position. Whether entity has or the business organization has sufficient amount of liquidity or sufficient amount of, let's say, working capital, sufficient amount of liquidity, or sufficient amount of cash flows to support short-term debt obligation. So liquidity ratios money whether the entity has sufficient liquidity or sufficient funds to pay for the short-term debt obligations and other short-term commitments when they become due. කෙටි කාලීන ණය පියවීම සඳහා කෙටි කාලීන ජංගම වාකීම් පියවීම සඳහා ප්‍රමාණවත් ජංගම වත්කම් සහ කෙටි කාලීන වත්කම් තිබෙනවාද කියන ප්‍රමාණවත් නම් තිබෙනවාද යන විශ්ලේෂණය කිරීම තමයි අපි liquidity ratios ගන්නෙ. ඔයාලා දන්නා මේදී ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් තියෙන ratios කීපයක්: current ratios, quick asset ratios that we studied for your advanced level. In addition, here we have inventory holding period, trade receivable period, then payable or the creditor periods. These ratios can be used to measure these working capital management or the liquidity management. හරි, ඒතර අපි මේ ratios වලින් අපි බලන්නේ liquidity. Sometimes this in some textbooks you can see this inventory management or the receivables period and the payables period usually considered as sometimes for efficiency ratios, so activity ratios. But here, since all these ratios reflect current asset and current liabilities මේ ratios සියල්ලගෙන් reflect කරන්නේ balance sheet එකේ current asset or current liability. ඔයාලා දන්නවා current asset and current liability වලින් පෙන්නන්නේ ව්‍යාපාරයේ working capital management, because managing working capital means managing current asset and current liabilities. හරි, එහෙනම් liquidity ratios වලින් අපි measure කරන්නේ whether entity has sufficient liquidity position to ensure short-term debt obligations are promptly paid without facing any difficulties. එතකොට කෙටි කාලීන මූල්‍ය තත්ත්වය මැනීම සඳහා තමයි මේ ද්‍රවශීලතා අනුපාත අපි පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ. Then liquidity means the liquidity ratios measures firm's ability to meet its short-term debt obligations. Company can be profitable but at the same time encounter cash flow problems. ඔයාලා දන්නවා ළමයි මේ liquidity ඔයාලා දැනගත යුතුයි. මේ ව්‍යාපාරික ද්‍රවශීලතාවයයි ලාභදායීත්වය අතර ඉතා වැදගත් සම්බන්ධයක් තිබෙනවා. ද්‍රවශීලතාවය කියන්නේ liquidity එක වැඩි වෙන්න ව්‍යාපාරයේ ලාභදායීත්වය අඩු වෙනවා. Higher the liquidity, lower the profitability. What is the reason ළමයි? liquidity වැඩි වෙනවා කියන්නේ ඔයාලගේ asset වැඩි වශයෙන් තියෙන්නේ මොන ෆෝම් එකේද? cash form එකේ. එහෙම නැත්නම් trade receivable form එකේ. එහෙම නැත්නම් stock කොහොම නැත්නම් inventory form එකේ. ඔයාලා දන්නවා ඔයාලගේ ව්‍යාපාරයේ asset cash ලෙස තිබුණොත් large බැංකුවේ current account එකේ තිබුණොත් මුදල් ලෙස. එහෙම නැත්නම් trade receivable ලෙස නායක යතියන් ලෙස එහෙම නැත්නම් විලඳ ලැබිය යුතු දෑ ලෙස බැලන්ස් ෂීට් එකේ තිබුණා කියලා මේ වගේ කිසිදු රිටර්න් එකක් වලට ලැබෙන්නේ නැහැ. So liquid asset is not capable of generating returns. හරි. ව්‍යාපාරික සියලුම asset ටික ළමයි cash ලෙස ලාච්චුවේ දාගෙන හිටියොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? කිසිදු real asset එක ඉන්වෙස්ට් කරනකොට then you can't generate return. You can't generate revenue. ඒ කියන්නේ if you keep 50% of your total asset as cash in your drawer or in your current account, what happens? Liquidity is very high, but you can't do anything. You can't buy goods, you can't manufacture goods, you don't have machines, you don't have lands, you don't have the equipment, you don't have tools, you don't have the required resources. Why? All the assets convert into cash and put in your drawer. You can higher the liquidity, lower the profitability. Liquidity වැඩි වෙනකොට ළමයි profitability අඩු වෙනවා. Profitability කරන්න නම් profit generate කරන්න නම් ඔයාලගේ cash real asset වල invest කරලා business operations වල යොදවන්න. cash ලෙස තිබුණා කියලා current account එකේ තිබුණා කියලා debtors ලෙස තිබුණා කියලා අපිට cash මේ revenue generate කරන්න බෑ. ඒ නිසා higher the liquidity, lower the profitability. එතකොට දැන් liquidity වැඩි වුණාම profitability අඩු වෙනවා, so we are unhappy. හැබැයි liquidity වැඩි වුණාම අපිට happiness එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒකක් තමයි මොකක්ද තියෙන advantage. Advantage තමයි higher the liquidity වුණාම ළමයි we don't have financial difficulties. Why? Whenever customer creditor comes and asks for money, we can settle. Whenever the utility bills, industry bill comes, we can pay. Whenever the employee asks for the salary, we can pay. එතකොට අපිට operating expense අපිට ඕනම වෙලාවක බොහොම පහසුවෙන් අපිට operating expenses ගෙවන්න පුළුවන්. අපිට short term මේ current liabilities we can easily pay because we have high liquidity. එතකොට high liquidity එකේ advantage එක තමයි මොකද්ද මේ short term financial difficulties අඩු වෙනවා, short term financial risk එක අඩු වෙනවා. හැබැයි disadvantage තමයි profitability එක drop වෙනවා. Profitability low, financial difficulties එක අඩු වෙනවා, financial risk එක අඩු වෙනවා. Profitability එක අඩුයි, financial difficulties high liquidity වුණාම profitability අඩු වෙනවා. Advantage තමයි financial difficulties ඇති වෙන්නේ නැහැ. Negative පැත්ත මගහැරෙනවා. හැබැයි profitability අඩු වෙනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් අපි liquidity වැඩි කළොත් මොකද? liquidity අඩු කළොත් if you want to increase profitability, we can reduce the liquidity. අපේ liquidity අඩු කරලා පුළුවන් profitability වැඩි කරන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ ව්‍යාපාරයේ සල්ලි තියාගන්නෙම නැහැ. You don't maintain right surplus cash. All the right and right surplus cash we quickly reinvest. අපි නම් stocks ගොඩක් maintain කරන්නේ නැහැ. We apply JIT method. So we don't purchase huge stock. We don't purchase stocks in bulk and store in the warehouse. අපි bulk වශයෙන් stock ගෙනල්ලා අපි warehouse එකේ ගොඩ ගහන්නේ. අපි bulk එකක් හැටියට stock එක මිලදී ගන්නවා නම් අපිට බෑන්ක් ඕඩියකින් හරි ෂෝට් ටර්ම් ලෝන් එකක් ගන්න තමයි ස්ටොක් මිලදී ගන්න ඕනේ. ඒ ස්ටොක් මිලදීගෙන වෙයාහවුස් එකේ ගබඩා කරලා විකිනනකම් අපිට ව්‍යාපාරයෙන් ණය බෑන්ක් ඕඩියකට ඉන්ට්‍රස්ට් ගන්න ඕනේ. ඒතර තියෙන ස්ටොක් එක මේන්ටේන් කරන්න අපිට අමතර වියදම් කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒ කියන්නේ ස්ටොක් එක මේන්ටේන් කිරීම buying bulk quantities and maintaining huge stock, what happens? Liquidity increase වෙනවා. හැබැයි profitability low. හරි. එනිසා අපිට පුළුවන් මොකද්ද? liquidity අඩු කරලා profitability වැඩි කරන්න අපිට පුළුවන් කරන්නේ. අපිට strategies ගන්න පුළුවන් කොහොමද? cash අඩුවෙන් තබා ගන්න. stock අඩුවෙන් තබා ගන්න. ණය ගැතියෝ අඩුවෙන් තබා ගන්න. ඒ හැම විටම අපි තියෙන cash වලින් අපි machines මිලදී ගන්නවා. equipment, tools and vehicles මිලදීගෙන අපි ව්‍යාපාර production capacity වැඩි කරනවා. දැන් මොකද වෙන්නේ? So you don't maintain huge cash balance, or you don't maintain sufficient cash balance. You don't maintain sufficient stocks because major proportion of your total asset invested in long-term assets. Then what happens? Profitability increase. However, you don't have sufficient funds to maintain your day-to-day business operation. So it will decrease it will increase your profitability. At the same time, it will create short-term financial difficulties. හරි. එයano liquidity එක වැඩි වුණාම profitability අඩු වෙනවා. liquidity අඩු වුණාම profitability වැඩි වෙනවා. හැබැයි ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ short-term financial difficulties ඇති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඔයාලට operating expenses වෙලාවට කලට වෙලාවට ගෙවන්න බැරි වෙන්න පුළුවන්. හරි. So there must be a balance between liquidity and the profitability. So accordingly, entity should not have unnecessarily huge liquidity. Unnecessarily liquidity is not good. At the same time, low liquidity also not good. We should maintain, or we should strike the balance between liquidity and profitability. හරි. එතකොට දැන් මේ සිද්ධියදී අපිට මේ සිනාරියෝ එකේදී අපිට හිතන්න පුළුවන් liquidity වැඩි ව්‍යාපාරයකට අපිට දෙන්න පුළුවන් strategies මොනවද? Let's say there's a business entity. It has right unnecessary liquidity position, right? Huge cash balance or huge unnecessary stock balances, then unused surplus cash balances, right? Then huge collection, irrecoverable trade receivables, right? Lot of trade receivables, so delayed trade receivable balances. එතකොට අපිට මේ වගේ current assets ප්‍රමාණය වැඩි වුණොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? ව්‍යාපාර liquidity වැඩි වෙනවා. අපිට දෙන්න පුළුවන් suggestions මොනවද? So we can suggest if we have unnecessarily or the surplus cash balance, we can advise the management to reinvest in the short-term deposits or long-term assets, right? Or we can, if you have the bulk stocks, slow-moving stocks, huge stock balance, we can advise the management to undertake short-term sales promotion campaigns and right increase your sales, right? ගොඩ ගහලා තව ටිකක් අපි ඒ නිසා තමයි සමහර ඩොලර් දැකලා ඇති stock clearance sales කියලා අපි management strategies අපි introduce කරන්න පුළුවන්. තොග තොග අවසන් කිරීමේ මහා සේල් නේ. තොග අවසන් කිරීමේ මහා සේල් කියලා කියන්නේ තොගේ අපි ඉක්මන ඉවර කරන්න. right? ඒකෙන් මොකද අපි කරන්නේ? අපි ස්ටොක් එක කන්වර්ට් කරගන්නවා කෑෂ් වලට. ඊට පස්සේ කෑෂ් අපි reinvest කරනවා මේ effective fruitful assets වලට. හරි. Then if you have huge uncollectible irrecoverable, let's say trade receivable, අපිට trade receivable විශාල වශයෙන් අපිට තිබෙනවා නම් අපිට පුළුවන් advice කරන්න management එකට proper follow up procedures ඇතුළත් කරන්න. එහෙම නැත්නම් factoring වලට ගිහිල්ලා ණයකතු කරන ආයතනයක කිසිමකට ඇවිල්ලා ණයකතු කරන ආයතනවල පවරන්න මේ ණය collect කරගන්න කියලා legal action ගැනීම කිසිදු වෙන විකල්පයක් නැත්නම් විවිධ ක්‍රම මගින් trade receivable අපිට පුළුවන් හැකි ඉක්මනින් collection එක expedite කරන්න. right? ණයට උපමාදී හොයලා බලලා ණයට කිරීම, ක්‍රෙඩිට් වර්දිනස් එක ඇසෙස් කරලා ණයට විකිණීම, ක්‍රෙඩිට් වර්දිනස් එකට අනුකූලව ක්‍රෙඩිට් ලිමිට්ස් ලබා දීම, proper follow up procedures apply කිරීම, right? trade debtors insure කිරීම, හරි? factoring agencies වල support එක ලබා ගැනීම තුළින් අපිට මේ liquidity collect කරන්න පුළුවන්. හරි. දැන් ඊළඟට අපි බලමු යම් මේකින් if you have currently let's say financial difficulties, if you have liquidity problems, අපි දැනට liquidity problems තියෙනවා අපිට ව්‍යාපාර දෙන්න පුළුවන් advisors මොනවද? අපි හිතමු ව්‍යාපාරයේ current cash position එක, short term liquidity position එක is very low. So how we can generate cash, right? So we can say again stock clearance sales we can advise, or sales promotion we can advise, or we can expedite the collection from debtors, or we can go for borrowings. We can advise the management, right? If there are no other ways, we can go for borrowings. ව්‍යාපාර සල්ලි නැත්තම් හරි අපිට ඇඩ්වයිස් කරන්න පුළුවන් borrowings වලින් ගන්න. එහෙම නැත්නම් කිසිදු ඔප්ෂන් එකක් නැත්නම් කිසිදු ආකාරයකින් ව්‍යාපාරයේ මුදල් ලබා ගන්න විදියක් නැත්නම් අල්ටිමේට් රිසෝට් එක තමයි going for right issue. අවසාන වශයෙන් ව්‍යාපාර උදව් කරන බැංකුත් නැත්නම් වෙන කිසිදු කෙනෙක් නැත්නම් සප්ලයර්ස්ලා භාණ්ඩ ලබා දෙන්නේ නැත්නම් සේවකයෝගෙන් බෑටෙන්නේ නැත්නම් පරිගවන්න නැති නිසා අවසානම නවාතන තමයි ව්‍යාපාරයට ගැලවුම් කරුවා shareholdersලා. We can suggest the shareholders or discuss with the major shareholders going for a right issue. ඉතින් right issue එකට major shareholders කැමති නම් right issue එකක් කළා අපිට සල්ලි ගන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි ඒක ඉතාමත්ම worst case scenario එකකදී වෙන්න ඕන දෙයක්. මොකද short term liquidity problem එකකට share issue කරලා ගන්න ඒක තරම් සුදුසු නෑ. නමුත් ශ්‍රී ලංකාව මේ මුලදෙන crisis scenario එකදී ඔයාලා බැලුවොත් බලන්න පුළුවන් තේරුම් ගන්න පුළුවන් ෂෙයා මාකට් එකේ බොහොමයක් කම්පැනිස් මේ දවස්වල right issues කරනවා to avoid short term liquidity problems, to solve short term liquidity problems. හරි එසා short term liquidity problems තියෙන companies වලට මොන වගේ solutions දෙන්නේ වැනි advices කරන්න ඔයාලට පුළුවන් වෙනවා. So this is how current ratios are measured, quick asset ratios are measured. So you all have studied this for your advanced level. And inventory holding period. So this is again relating to inventory, emetan stock, emetatoge. This is a part of the current asset. So it is relating to working capital, right? එතකොට මේ inventory holding period එක අපි ඇයි මේ liquidity එකද මනින්නේ? It is a part of the current asset. So current asset represents working capital management. Current asset represents entities liquidity position. So accordingly, inventory holding period reflects entities liquidity position. Right? So accordingly, how it is how the inventory holding period is measured? Right? We can take inventory divided by cost of sale. Inventory is the line item taken from the balance sheet. Cost of sale is the line item taken from the income statement. I told you, if you relate income statement item with the balance sheet item, for the balance sheet item, we need to usually take average figure. එනිසා සාමාන්‍යයෙන් information තිබෙනවා නම් inventory ගන්නේ balance sheet එකෙන්, තෝගේ තියෙන balance sheet එකෙන්, it is prepared as at a particular date But cost of sale is from the income statement, which is prepared for a period. එනිසා balance sheet figure එකට අපි සාමාන්‍ය ගන්න average. එනිසා inventory එක අපිට අවශ්‍ය නම් ගන්න පුළුවන් average inventory. If you don't have beginning and ending inventory balances, we assume whatever the given inventory as the average inventory. Okay, so inventory divided by cost of sale multiplied by 365. There are other alternative ways of getting the inventory holding periods. For example, you can divide 365 or number of working days by the inventory or stock turnover ratio. Stock turnover ratio කියලා කියන්නේ cost of sales divided by average inventory. Total cost of sale divided by average inventory. එකට අපි කියනවා inventory turnover ratio. So here we don't discuss that, right? But we have studied for advanced level. You can take number of working days. So here 365 divided by inventory turnover, it gives inventory holding period. At the same time, this ratio also gives you inventory holding period, right? Cost of sale for 365 days. So accordingly, multiplied by inventory, that gives you inventory holding period. So once you compute the inventory holding period, we can compare it with the prior period holding period. So usually lower the holding period is preferred. Holding තොග නේවාසික කාලය අඩු වන තරමට අපි හොඳයි කියලා කියනවා. ඇයි තොගයක් අපි ලැබී ගන්නේ පැල්පදියම් කරගන්න ඉන්න නෙමෙයි. තොගයක් අපි ලැබී ගන්න හැකි ඉක්මනින් විකුණලා කැෂ් කරගන්න. හරි. නිසා we prefer, right, lower the holding period. තොග නේවාසික කාලය අඩු වෙන තරමට performance හොඳයි කියලා අපි කියනවා. එතකොට තොග නේවාසික කාලය අඩු වුණොත් හොඳ ඉන්ඩිකේටර්. තොග නේවාසික කාලය වැඩි වුණොත් ඒ කියන්නේ තොග විකිනෙන්නේ නැතුව slow moving stock බාටපත් වෙනවා. හරි. එතන අපි දැන් බලමු මේ ratio එක automatically calculate වෙන accounting system එකෙන්. So once the ratio is calculated, let's say prior period holding period එක 30 days. According to the prior period information, our inventory holding period එක 30 days. ඒ කියන්නේ දින 30කින් inventory එක turnover වෙනවා. Current period inventory turnover එක 45 days. ඒ කියන්නේ ළමයි current ගිය period එකේ inventory එක ලැබි ගත්තාම stock එක bulk එකක් ලැබි ගත්තාම දින 30කින් sales වෙනවා. current period එකේදී දින 45ක් යනවා ඒක sale වෙන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ holding period එක වැඩි. So higher the holding period. හරි. එහෙම නැත්නම් lower the stock turnover. stock turnover එක අඩු වෙද්දී holding period එහෙම නැත්නම් holding period එක පැත්තෙන් holding period එක වැඩි වෙද්දී තියෙන consequence මොනවද? You should be able to discuss or advise what are the adverse consequences of low stock turnover or low stock turnover or high stock holding period. Holding period එකේ වැඩි වීමේ එහෙම නැත්නම් stock turnover එක අඩු වීමේ adverse consequences මොනවද? ළමයි stock turnover එක අඩු වෙද්දී stock ගොඩ ගැහෙනවා. right? stock accumulate වෙනවා. stock slow moving stocks වැඩි වෙනවා. So what are the adverse consequences? So higher the inventory holding period, there are several adverse consequences. What are the adverse consequences? Number one, you unnecessarily tie up your working capital in the stocks. ඔයාලා stocks මිලදීගෙන තියෙන්නේ current account එකෙන් ණයක් කරගෙන bank ODයක් කරගෙන stock එක මිලදීගෙන දබඩාවේ ගොඩ ගහන තියෙනවා. විකිනෙන තුරු අපිට බැංකුවට interest ගන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා. So accordingly low stock turnover එක disadvantage එක තමයි adverse consequence එක තමයි you tie up your valuable funds unnecessarily in your inventory. Other thing, it will increase your stock holding cost, maintenance cost, තොගයක් අපි නිකන් තියන්න බෑ. Some stock may require you require to maintain the um, right temperature. සමහරට AC environment එක තුල වෙන්න පුළුවන් මේ stocks maintain කරන්න. Then holding cost to increase. Or sometimes you need to um, right place a security guards or security service to provide the protection for this inventory. ඒතකොට security service තියෙනවා. ගාන සිත් එක. ඒ කියන්නේ holding cost එක වැඩි නම් right increase employs additional cost of capital or alternative cost of capital, holding cost increase, stock outdate වීමේ risk එක වැඩි, right? Slow moving stocks, right? Very likely to outdate or expire. So that's a disadvantage. At the same time, if you have more stocks, there's a possibility for stock related frauds. තෝග අනවශ්‍ය පරිදි ගොඩ ගැහෙද්දී ඉන්න සෙවීකවුන් ස්ටොක් සම්බන්ධ අයත කටයුතු කරන්න ඉඩ තිබෙනවා. Right? Stock සම්බන්ධ වංචා හා දූෂණ සිද්ධ වෙන්න පුළුවන්. Right? So according these are the some of the disadvantage of having a low stock turnover or high stock holding period. Then receivable period කියන්නේ ණය ගැතියන්ගේ collection කාලය. අපි බාණ්ඩ ණයට ඉක්මතුවාම ඒකේ collect කිරීම සඳහා ගත වෙන කාලය. So we can say receivables collection period. This is similar to inventory holding period. අපි lower the collection period is preferred. ණය ගැතියන් අපි බාණ්ඩ විකුණුවාම අපි හැම විටම උත්සාහ කරනවා අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන හැකි ඉක්මනින් ඒ මුදල් collect කරගන්න. So lower the collection period is preferred. So if you have, let's say, in case in a particular scenario, you are saying you are given, let's say, prior period collection period 30 days, current period collection period has increased to 45 days. ගිය අවුරුද්දේ අපි විකුණලා දින 30න් collect කරගත්ත මුදල් මේ අවුරුද්දේ අපිට දින 45ක් යනවා. එහෙම ණයක මොකද්ද? Adverse situation එක, negative situation එක. Your working capital management is not appropriate. Working capital management එකේ කිසියම් අඩුපාඩුවක් තියෙනවා. Due to some other reason, like collection period has increased, it is negatively affect your working capital management, or it negatively affect your short-term liquidity. Right? ව්‍යාපාරයේ move cash position එකට current asset වල නෙවෙයි ව්‍යාපාරයේ quick asset ratio එකට විශේෂයෙන්ම cash position එකට ණය එකතු කිරීමේ ප්‍රමාද වීම බලපාන. අපි දන්නවා debtorsලා consider කරනවා කියලා quick asset ratio. නමුත් ව්‍යාපාරයේ මූල්‍ය cash generate කිරීමේ අවශ්‍යතාවය ඇති වුණොත් ණය ගැතියුන්ගෙන් collection එක unnecessary ප්‍රමාද වුණොත් අපිට ඒක ගැටලුවක් වෙනවා. ඒ නිසා අපි කොහොමද ණය ගැතියන්ගෙන් so what are the risks of lengthy collection period? ණය ගැතියන්ගේ collection period එක long වෙන්න ප්‍රමාද වෙන්න තියෙන risk මොනවද? එකක් තමයි bad debt risk එක වැඩි වෙනවා. Doubtful risk provision එක වැඩි වෙනවා. debtors ලගේ collection and follow up procedure එකේ cost එක වැඩි වෙනවා. Right? ඊට පස්සේ administrative cost එක වැඩි වෙනවා. debtors අට මේ call කරන්න ඕන sometimes insurance cost එක වැඩි වෙන්න පුළුවන්. So accordingly, there are some negative consequences if the collection period is increased. Inside වගේ points ගැන consider කරන්න. Again, emphasize calculation of ratios are not important. Ratios are automatically calculated. You should be able to interpret and advise strategies. So payable period also important. Similar to collection period, it is opposite. As far as payable period is concerned, it is good to negotiate with your suppliers to extend the payable period. ණය ගැතියන්ගෙන් අපි negotiate කරගන්න ඕන lengthy credit period එකක්. Customers ලාට අපි negotiate කරගන්න ඕන shorter credit period එකක්. අපි ණය ගැතියන්ට බාන ණයට විකුණනවා එක industry practice එකක් වෙදී අපි ණයට විකුණන්න ඕන. ණය ගැතියන් ඒ කියන්නේ අපේ customers ලාට බාන ණයට විකුණීම industry practice එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි අපි උත්සාහ කරන්න ඕන අඩුම කාලෙකින් collection එක ලබා ගන්න. Suppliers are concerned. As far as suppliers are concerned, we should negotiate uh, for lengthy credit period. නායකයන්ගෙන් අපි suppliers අපිට මාසයකට credit period එකක් ලැබෙද්දී let's say suppliers have given up the goods for 30-day credit period. We should never sell our goods for our customers for 60 days. Suppliers ලා අපිට දින 30කට බාණ්ඩ සපයා තියෙන විට ඒ බාණ්ඩ අරගෙන අපේ කස්ටමර්ස්ලාට දින 60කට අපිට ණයට දෙන්න බෑ. සමහර ළමයි ඔයාලා දැක ඇති කඩවල වල ගහලා තියෙනවා රයිට් එක මේ දැන්වීමක් ජනප්‍රිය දැන්වීමක් හැම කඩේකම වගේ සිගරට් ණයට ඉල්ලා අමනාපනවන. හැබැයි ඒ කඩේ ගහලා නැනේ පාන් ණයට ඉල්ලා අමනාපනවන්න, බනිස් ණයට ඉල්ලා අමනාපනවන්න, එළවලු ණයට ඉල්ලා අමනාපනවන්න කියලා ගහලා නැහැ. සිගරට් වලට ගහලා තියෙනවා. ඇයි ඒ? ඔයාලා දන්නා ළමයි සිගරට් කම්පැනියේ මේ ක්‍රෙඩිට් පීරියඩ් එක 0. සප්ලයර්ස්ලා never සප්ලයර්ස්ලා tobacco company cash basis තමයි මේ සිගරට් ලබා දෙන්නේ. කියන්නේ cash කෙලින්ම cash දීලා තමයි සිගරට් ගන්න ඕනේ. ඒතර ඔයාලා cash දීලා සිගරට් අරගෙන කස්ටමර්ට ණයට දෙන්න බෑ. එහෙම වුණොත් ව්‍යාපාරයේ liquidity problem එකක්. ඒ නිසා කිසියම් ව්‍යාපාරිකයෙක් ලියලා කරන ළමයි සිගරට් ණයට ඉල්ලා අමනාපනවන් කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ එයා හොඳ මේ දැනුවත් වුණොත් එයා හොඳ working capital management එකක් කරන හොඳ working capital management policy එකක් අනුගමනය කරන ව්‍යාපාරික. right සිගරට් නාටි ලාපරම්නවා ඒක කරලා තියෙන බද සප්ලයි ක්‍රෙඩිට් පීරියඩ් එකයි කස්ටමර් ක්‍රෙඩිට් පීරියඩ් එකයි මැච් කරලා තියෙනවා. right okay so accordingly as far as suppliers payable period is concerned it is better to negotiate lengthy credit period. Then there are some other ratios. This is leverage ratios, gearing ratios. Leverage ratios and gearing ratios are used to measure long-term financial risk. This is basically we measure entities' long-term financial risk or long-term financial position or long-term solvency position by using debt to equity ratios, debt to total asset ratios or interest coverage ratios. එකකින් අපි mainly measure කරන්නේ ව්‍යාපාරික දිගුකාලීන මූල්‍ය සුරක්ෂිතභාවය එහෙම නැත්නම් දිගුකාලීන මූල්‍ය අවදානක් මනින්නේ මේ leverage ratio එකේ ratios වලින් right so you can see leverage ratios measures long term financial risk use of debt capital in the capital structure relative to equity capital ඒකට ළමයි මේ leverage කියන්නේ ඉතාමත් වැදගත් detail මේ broad concept එකක් මේ leverage එකේ concept දෙකක් තියෙනවා operating leverage and financial leverage මෙතන අපි කතා කරන්නේ financial leverage usually leverage means use of fixed cost right leverage means use of fixed cost in the cost structure ඒක ටිකක් ගැඹුරින් කියපු දෙයක් ඒ කියන්නේ ව්‍යාපාර cost structure එකේ fixed cost එකක් තියෙන ළමයි leverage එකක් තියෙනවා operating leverage කියලා කියන්නේ use of fixed cost in the operating cost. ඒ කියන්නේ ව්‍යාපාරේ business operations වලදී fixed cost එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ fixed employee salary, fixed let's say any operating cost like fixed building rent, right? Machine depreciations, employee salary, huge fixed cost එකක් තියෙනවා නම් ඒ කියන්නේ ළමයි එතන තියෙනවා operating leverage එක. Then financial leverage කියලා කියන්නේ if the entity has debt capital, let's say like debentures, as a result of debentures, right? There's a fixed interest cost on the income statement. If you have debt capital, let's say debentures තිබුණ තියෙදි වෙනවද annually fixed interest cost එකක් අපේ P&L එක මත තියෙනවා. එතකොට P&L එකේ තියෙනවා fixed operating cost එකකුත් තියෙනවා. ඔයාලා දන්නවා interest කියන්නේ interest never considered as an operating expense එකක්. බේකරියක් රන් කරද්දී බේකරියේ හිමියා ඉන්ට්‍රස්ට් එකක් ගෙවනවා නම් ඒ ඉන්ට්‍රස්ට් එක බේකරියේ ඔපරේෂන්ස් වලට දාලා නැහැ. රයිට් බේකරියක් රන් කරන ව්‍යාපාරිකයෙක් ඉන්ට්‍රස්ට් ගන්නේ ණයක් ගන්න නිසා. හැබැයි මේ ණය ගැනීම බේකරිය රන් කිරීමට අත්‍යවශ්‍ය වියදමක් නෙවෙයි. බේකරිය ඔපරේටිං එක්ස්පෙන්ස් කියලා කියන තිනුකු පිටිවල මිල මේ දව ගන්න මේ දර ගන්නවා නම් දර පොඩු පාන් වල දරවල මිල employee salaries cost other cost of other ingredients those are the operating expenses හැබැයි interest කියන්නේ business operation වල අදාළ interest cost එකක් නෙමෙයි හරි මම ටිකක් ගැඹුරු සංකල්පයක් හැටියට කිව්වා leverage කියලා කියන්නේ use of fixed cost දැන් ඔයාලා කෙනෙක් හිතන්න පුළුවන් මෙතෙන්ද කොහොමද ඒ කතාව අදාළ වෙන්නේ හරි මෙතන අපි කතා කරනවා right මේ leverage කියන එක අපි තව විදිහට කියන්න පුළුවන් financial leverage කියන එක තව විදිහට අපි කියන්න පුළුවන් ව්‍යාපාරික capital structure එක තුළ ඔයාලා දන්න capital structure කියන්නේ mix of debt and equity capital you know economic structure ආර්ථිකයක මේ ආර්ථික ව්‍යුහය ඔයාලා දන්නවා agriculture industrial and service sector එක කොහොමද total economic එකට contribute වෙන්නේ capital structure කියන්නේ ඒවා එකක් ව්‍යාපාරයේ total capital එකට debt capital and equity capital contribute වෙලා තියෙන ආකාරය තමයි capital structure කියන්නේ. එතකොට ළමයි if the entity has debt capital component in the capital structure we can say that entity has a financial leverage. entity එකේ debt capital එකක් තියෙනවා නම් capital structure තුළ ඒ entity එකේ financial leverage එකක් තියෙනවා. debt capital එකක් තියෙනවා නම් ළමයි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් P&L එක තුළ fixed interest component එකක් තියෙනවා. debt capital එකක් තියෙනවා නම් අපි සාමාන්‍ය debt capital නිකම්ම නෙවෙයි කියන්නේ interest bearing debt capital එකක් තියෙනවා ළමයි. අන්න income statement එකට operating expense වලට අමතරව වෙනවා මොකද තව interest expense එකක්. ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට leverage ක්‍රම දෙකකට කියන්න පුළුවන්. එකක් තමයි use of fixed cost in the cost structure or as far as financial leverage is concerned, use of debt capital in the capital structure, right? So accordingly, this financial risk can be measured using debt to equity ratio, then debt to total asset ratio වලින් අපිට financial leverage මනින්න පුළුවන්. Higher the leverage, higher the financial leverage, higher the risk. Financial leverage වැඩි වෙන්න ව්‍යාපාරයේ long term financial risk එක වැඩි වෙනවා. financial leverage අඩු වෙන්න ව්‍යාපාරයේ long term financial risk එක අඩු වෙනවා. ඒතර මේ debt ගැනීම හොඳද නරකද? ඒ කියන්නේ debt to equity ratio එක ideal level එක කීයද? සාමාන්‍ය ළමයි debt to equity ratio එක අපි මේ first එකෙන් අපි ratio අපි මනින්නේ debt to equity. ඒ කියන්නේ ratio between debt capital and equity capital. අපි හිතමු equity capital එක 100යි, මිලියන 100යි. debt capital එකත් මිලියන 100යි. ඒ කියන්නේ කරට කර සමානයි. එහෙනම් debt to equity ratio කියන්නේ වෙන්නේ 1යි. debt capital මිලියන 100යි, equity capital එකත් මිලියන 100යි. දෙගොල්ලම සමානව දානවා. කරට කර. එහෙනම් debt to equity ratio කීයද? 1. එහෙම නැත්නම් 100%. එවිට අපි කියනවා gearing එක moderate gearing right සම තෝලනයක් තියෙන තෝලනේ සමානයි මේ gearing වලට අපි සිංහලෙන් කියන තෝලනය right so debt to equity ratio එක 1 වුණොත් අපි කියනවා moderate gearing එක මධ්‍යස්ථයි debt to equity එක if it is more than 1 ඉතින් මේ පිළිතුරු ළමයි එකට වඩා වැඩි වෙන්න නම් මේ numerator එක වැඩි වෙන්න එපා මේ debt to equity ratio if it is more than 1 ඒකේ අර්ථය මොකද්ද මේ පිළිතුර එකට වඩා වැඩි වෙන්න නම් debt වැඩි වෙන්න ඕනේ equity වලට වඩා ඒක තමයි උත්තරේ එකට වඩා වැඩි වෙන්නේ if debt to equity ratio is more than 1 අපි කියනවා high financial risk එනම් risk එක සාපේක්ෂව වැඩි ඇයි debt equity වලට වඩා debt වැඩි හිතන්න equity 100යි debt 150යි නම් උත්තරේ 1.5යි එහෙමනම් අපි කියනවා high financial risk. financial risk එක වැඩි වීම ළමයි හොඳද නරකද? right? debt capital එක තිබීම හොඳද නරකද? මේක ළමයි long term loan debatable ප්‍රශ්නයක්. නමුත් carefully උත්තර දෙන්න ඕන debt capital එකක් තිබීම හොඳද නරකද කියන එක situational අපිට in general කියන්න පුළුවන් ළමයි debt capital සාමාන්‍යයෙන් if the economy performs well debt capital is good. ණය ප්‍රාර්ථනය පාවිච්චි කිරීම නරක දෙයක් නෙවෙයි. ආර්ථිකය හොඳින් ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනවා නම් ණය ප්‍රාර්ථනයේ භාවිතය හොඳයි. හේතුව ණය ප්‍රාර්ථනය අපි ලබා ගන්නේ සාමාන්‍ය ණය ප්‍රාර්ථනයේ cost එක අඩුයි. right? ණය පොලිය සාපේක්ෂව අඩුයි ඉක්විටි වලට වඩා. તો ණය වලට අපි ගෙවන පොලිය අපි හිතමු 15% කියලා. ඒතකොට debt capital වල cost එක 15%. අපි 15% වලට ණය අරගෙන අපි 30% වලට investment එකට දැම්මොත් එහෙම පුළුවන්. So it is good because cost of borrowing is 15% and the return on investment is 30%. So we have additional 15% return. This return can be enjoyed by the shareholder as the business operator, right? So debt capital is not a sin. ණය ගැනීම පාපයක් නෙවෙයි. તો ලංකාවේ තත්ත්වය මොකද? ලංකාවේ තියෙන ණය අරගෙන effectively පාවිච්චි කරලා නැහැ. ලංකාවේ තත්ත්වය ඇත්තටම ඉක්විටි වලට වඩා debt වැඩි. ලංකාවේ ඉක්විටි වලට වඩා debt වැඩි. දැන් අපේ ඔඩිටර් කීප හැටියට දැන් අවුරුදු කීපයකට කලින් ලංකාවේ debt capital අපි හිතමු ආසන වශයෙන් බිලියන 50යි නම් asset තියෙන බිලියන 2ක්. ඒක අර accounting equation එකේ අමුතු දෙයක්. right? කියන්නේ ණය තියෙනවා asset නැහැ. ණය ටික ඉතිරි asset එක නැහැ. asset ටික හොරගම් කරලා. right? so ඒ වෙන විදිහට මොකද වෙන්නේ අනිවාර්යෙන්ම තියෙන crisis එකක්. So we need to have appropriate balance between this debt and equity capital. Higher the debt capital, higher the gearing. Higher the gearing is considered lamai good if entity performs well. Higher the gearing lamai, higher the financial return, higher the return. හැබැයි higher the gearing, higher the risk. අපෝ කියනවා gearing වැඩි වෙද්දි financial gearing වැඩි වෙද්දි ඒකේ advantage එක තමයි ඒකේ happiness එක තමයි it increase shareholders return. return එක වැඩි වෙනවා. gearing වැඩි වෙද්දි return එක වැඩි වෙනවා. හැබැයි gearing වැඩි වෙද්දි financial risk එක වැඩි වෙනවා. financial failure එක වැඩි වෙනවා. right? ඒක තමයි financial gearing වල parallel relationship එක higher the gearing, higher the risk and higher the return. Higher the risk, higher the return. Okay, if the economy performs well, it's okay. If the economy is going for a crisis, sales drop, earnings drop, but you are committed to keep paying interest and installment, then you are at a crisis. Economic crisis එකක් ආවොත් crisis එකක් කියලා ණය නොගෙවා ඉන්න බෑ. පොලිය නොගෙවා ඉන්න බෑ. හැබැයි crisis එකක් ආවොත් sales drop වෙනවා, කඩවල් වැහෙනවා, business වැහෙනවා. හැබැයි ණය පොලිය ගෙවන්න ඕනේ. ඒකට අපිට සිදු වෙනවා බංකොලොත් වෙන්නේ. එහෙම නැත්නම් short term long term financial crisis එකකුත් තියෙනවා. Right? So accordingly then there's another ratio to measure the long term financial risk, that is interest cover. Usually this ratio interest cover ratio අපි කොහොමද මනින්නේ? operating profit operating profit කියලා කියන්නේ profit before interest and tax divided by finance cost. Operating profit interest before interest and tax is the income statement, the line item. Take the income statement operating profit before interest and tax divide by entities finance cost. Then you see how many times your finance cost can be covered by one period profit. එක අවුරුද්ද profit එක මගින් ඒ අවුරුද්දේ interest cost එක කී වතාවක් cover වෙනවා. Let's say operating profit before interest and tax is 5 million and annual interest cost is 1 million. ඒ කියන්නේ එක අවුරුද්දක profit එකෙන් අවුරුදු 5ක finance cost එක cover කරන්න පුළුවන්. හරි? ඒ කියන්නේ interest cover එක වැඩි වෙන තරමටම financial risk එක අඩුයි. Okay. Then, so these is very important. These are the issues surrounding the use of financial performance indicators. Lamai, so far we discussed right? Several ratios, different accounting ratios as a measure of five performance indicators, right? So all those accounting ratios can be considered as financial performance indicators. මේ financial performance indicators වල ළමයි lot of there are a lot of limitations. There are a lot of drawbacks. මේ financial performance indicators වල තියෙන drawbacks අපි දැන් බලමු. එකක් තමයි inherent limitations in the financial statement. අපි financial performance indicators මානින්නේ financial statements පාවිච්චි කරලා. financial statements වල ළමයි ආවේනික අඩුපාඩු තියෙනවා. ඒවා අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම එහෙනම් බලපානවා accounting ratios වලට. Then different reporting practices. So we, right, different organizations may adopt or may use different accounting policies to prepare their financial statement. Let's say you are going to compare your organization result with another competitor's result, right? Let's say you depreciate your account, you accounts your PPE according to cost model, and your computer use the revaluation model. Can you compare, right? No, you can't compare. Why? Two different accounting policies, right? Again, I emphasize, again, I repeat it. Let's say there are two companies. You are going to compare the two companies' financial result and financial position. Company A, PPE, right, subsequently measured using cost model. Same industry, company B, they applied revaluation model to compute the PP, right? PP measure කරන එකක් revaluation අනෙක් company cost model, right? So can you compare this? If the property plant and equipment is a significant component, represent significant amount of the total asset, and it has a significant impact on the P&L, let's say, then their reporting policy directly affect the result and position, right? So according to different accounting reporting practices, um, will create some limitation when it comes to compare two different companies' financial result and financial position. Then earnings management. My accounting, it is possible top management can manage their return, manage their earnings. අපි හිතමු කිසියම් අවුරුද්දක 31st March year end වෙන financial year එක අපි හිතමු let's say the entities has not been able to achieve the sales target. 31st March වෙද්දී ඒ year එකේ sales target achieve කරන්න බැරි වෙලා තව 5 million විතර sales මදි. This management can, right, negotiate with their, right, several reliable customers and ask them to, right, invoice their March and May sales in advance. අපි ඉන්නේ මාර්තු වල ඉන්නේ අපේ customers ලා කියන්න පුළුවන් අපි convince කරන්න පුළුවන් you better, right, invoice or invoice uh, April month sales. එහෙම නැත්නම් management can sell goods, right, in advance. අප්‍රේල් මාසේ මැයි මාසේ orders ටික දැම්මම අරගෙන මාර්තු මාසෙම විකුණලා දාන්න. මාර්තු මාසෙම invoice generate කරලා අපි deliver කරලා දාන්න. එතකොට මොකද වෙන්නේ? මාර්තු මාසේ sales generate වෙනවා. මාර්තු මාසේ sales වලට එනවා අප්‍රේල් මාසේ විකිණෙන තිබිච්ච දේවල්. මැයි මාසේ විකිණෙන තිබුණු දේවල්. We will collect money later, right? So somehow, is it prohibited? It is not prohibited. Management can sell. Customers can buy goods in advance. Management can convince the customer to buy goods in advance. Management might offer some attractive discounts. So management, according to what management has done, April month වෙන්න තිබිච්ච sales ටික අපි මාර්තු මාසෙම විකුණලා දාත්තා. මාර්ච් මේ වල මැයි මාසෙ විකිණෙන තිබිච්ච stocks ටික අපි මාර්තු මාසෙම අපි විකුණලා අපි මාර්තු මාසයේ ඒ කියන්නේ කලින් current financial period එකේ sales අපි වැඩි කරන්න. Right? It is possible. Right? Then possibilities for window dressing. So these accounting ratios can be easily manipulated. Accounting වල තියෙන ratio එකක් නේ number එකක් නේ percentage නේ. These percentage can be easily manipulated used by manipulating either numerator or denominator. මේ denominator එක හෝ numerator එක වෙනස් කළාමයි මේ ratios අපිට ලේසියෙන් manipulate කරන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් for example let's say particular business organization the reporting date එකේ තියනවා කියලා current asset 4 million, current liability 3 million. හරි. current asset 4 million, current liability 3 million. Now according to current ratio කීයද තියෙන්නේ? current ratio තියෙන්නේ current asset 4 million divided by current liability 3 million. 1.33යිනේ තියෙන්නේ. 4 million divided by 3 million. Current asset 4 million divided by current liability 3 million. උත්තරේ 1.33. Right? You know, generally current ratio සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි සලකනවා ideal කියලා to have 2:1. current liability රුපියලකට current asset රුපියල් දෙකක් තිබීම suitable කියලා අපි කියනවා. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් හරි. It is not a hard and fast rule. It is not a universally acceptable rule. but සාමාන්‍ය අපි කියන current ratio එකක් දෙකට එක අනුපාතයක් සාමාන්‍යයෙන් හොඳයි කියලා. දැන් මේ ව්‍යාපාරයේ true scenario තමයි current asset 4 million, current liability 3 million තියෙන්නේ. ratio එක මැන්නොත් හරියට real scenario මොකද්ද? 4 බෙදීම 3 1.33. දැන් මේ මැනේජ්මන්ට් එකට අවශ්‍ය ළමයි කිසිදු මේ වංචා කිරීමකින් තොරව මේ පින්තූරේ සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම උඩු යටිකුරු කරන්න පුළුවන්. We can alter, manipulate this result. What management can do ළමයි? Management can using now current scenario එක තමයි මොකද්ද? current asset 4 million තියෙනවා. current liability 3 million. management පුළුවන් current asset වල තියෙන 2 million අරගෙන current liability 2 million settle කරලා පුළුවන්. ව්‍යාපාරයේ සල්ලි තියෙනවා ලක්ෂ 2ක්, ලක්ෂ 4ක් සල්ලි තියෙනවා. ලක්ෂ 4 සල්ලි වලින් අපි ණය හිමියෝ ගෙවලා දානවා ලක්ෂ 2ක්. දැන් මොකද තත්ත්වය? සල්ලි අපි හිතමු ඔක්කොම කරන්න ඉස්සත් කෑෂ් කියලා. කෑෂ් දැන් ලක්ෂ 4 ලක්ෂ 2කට බහිනවා. කරන්ට් ලයබිලිටි වල තිබුණ ලක්ෂ 3න් ලක්ෂ 2ක් සෙටල් වෙනවා. දැන් තියෙන්නේ ලක්ෂයයි. දැන් මොකක්ද වෙනවද? කරන්ට් ඇසට් ඉතිරි ලක්ෂ 2යි, කරන්ට් ලයබිලිටි ඉතිරි ලක්ෂ 1යි. බැලන්ස් ෂීට් එකට ඔයාලා රේෂියෝ ගණන් කරපුවාම හැමෝම සතුටින් කියනවා මේ ව්‍යාපාරයේ ideal current ratio එකක් තියෙනවා 2:1. But what management has really done, they have really just right settle the liability just to show a good picture. Right? In the real facts වල change එකක් උනේ නැහැ. balance sheet date එකට current asset වලින් current liability settle කරලා ratio එක manipulate කිරීම විතරයි කරේ. So ඒකෝනේ there are different ways of manipulating the ratios. Right? So window dressing එහෙම නැත්නම් manipulation කරන්න පුළුවන්. ළමයි window dressing කියලා කියන්නේ hiding the true picture. Hiding the true picture. The short term is accounting ratios, profitability ratios, all these ratios are short term. You know, we cannot use these ratios to measure long term position or long term performance measurements. අපේ financial statement අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් හදන්නේ short term period එකට. Right? Usually for 12 months, or it may be for 6 months, or it may be for 3 months or quarterly basis. So these financial statements are prepared for a short-term focus. So accordingly, it is not to concern the long-term perspective of the business. They're not considered as a holistic approach. So that is the most important limitation. One of the most important limitation the financial performance indicators lamai. May financial performance indicators වලින් it is not a holistic approach. ඒ කියන්නේ මේක ව්‍යාපාර සමස්තයක් විශේෂ මේ performance measure වෙන්නේ financial පැත්ත විතරමයි වෙන්නේ. For a business success ළමයි there are a lot of other areas that you need to consider. දැන් ව්‍යාපාරක හිතමු let's say particular business organization sales drop by 50%. හිතමු according to financial statement analysis we identify sales dropped, quantity sales dropped by 50% compared to prior period. So financially we say sales drop by 50%. Let's say sales margin, gross margin drop by 10%. අපිට ratios වලින් අපි කියනවා. හැබැයි what if this sales drop is resulting from due to lack or low quality of the goods. අපි તો මේ sales drop එක ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ භාණ්ඩ වල ගුණාත්වය අඩු නිසා. භාණ්ඩ වල ගුණාත්වය අඩු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මේ අපේ සේවකයන්ගේ අපි motivations වල ප්‍රශ්න නිසා, සේවකයන්ගේ ආකල්ප වල ප්‍රශ්න නිසා. අපි සේවකයන් customers හරියට සලකන්නේ නැහැ. Right? Let's say the quality of the goods and services are very low. We are not using the correct technology, correct production methods, and right other appropriate best practices are not used. If this is the correct surrounding of the issue, merely gross margin drop or sales drop itself doesn't reflect the true picture of the business. The sales drop වීම එහෙම නැත්නම් gross margin එක drop වීම usually it may be a symptom of the big problem. So accordingly, we need to consider a lot of other non-financial factors, right? Say, financial accounting mainly criticized for um, uh, it's an isolated approach. It's not a holistic approach, right? If you want to get a big picture about the business, we need to consider financial aspect and customers perspectives. We need to consider employees perspective. We need to consider internal business process perspective. ඒක ව්‍යාපාරික සාර්ථකත්වය ළමයි financial indicators බලන්නත් ඕන. සේවකයන්ගේ පැත්තේ indicators බලන්නත් ඕන. customers ලගේ පැත්තේ indicators බලන්න ඕන. ඊට අමතරව ව්‍යාපාරික business operations ව්‍යාපාර business internal environment එක පැත්තේ informations අපි බලන්නත් ඕන. මේ සියලුම ප්‍රතිකඩයන්ගේ performance measure කරනවා තමයි ඒක holistic approach එකක් වань. Right? So according to non-financial performance indicators, in general, firm success usually involves focusing on a small number of critical areas that they must excel at. කියන ළමයි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ව්‍යාපාරයක සාර්ථකත්වයට අපි දැන් කතා කරන්නේ non financial performance indicators. මේ තාක් අපි කතා කරේ financial performance indicators. Basically ratio analysis වලින් ව්‍යාපාරයක performance measure කිරීම. ඒ ratio analysis වල limitations ටික අපි මෙතන කතා කරා. දැන් අපි කතා කරන්නේ non financial performance indicators. ඒ කියන්නේ ව්‍යාපාරික සාර්ථකත්වයට ෆයිනෑන්ෂල් ඇස්පෙක්ට් විතරක් නෙවෙයි බලන්න ඕනේ ව්‍යාපාරයේ සාර්ථකත්වයට බලපාන ප්‍රධානතම ඒරියාස් හතරක් ළමයි හඳුනාගෙන තියෙනවා ඕනම ව්‍යාපාරයේ මේ හතර වැදගත් නම් මේ කාරණා හතර අයිඩෙන්ටිෆයි කරගත්තේ Robert S. Kaplan's Magin, he's the one who authored the concept of balanced scorecard approach to measure the performance. අපි traditional accounting for financial performance indicators වලින් අපි consider කරේ financial aspect එක විතරයි. නමුත් financial aspect එකෙන් පමණක් ව්‍යාපාරයක overall success එක අපිට measure කරන්න බෑ. ව්‍යාපාරයක තව විශාල පැතිකඩයන් තියෙනවා. හොයලා බලන්න ඕන. ඒ අනුව ව්‍යාපාරයක සාර්ථකත්වයට අවශ්‍ය වෙන 4 success factors තියෙනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් in general for any business organization, any business organization, success is dependent on 4 key critical areas. That is innovative and creativity, and the customer focus, then the internal business process perspectives and appropriate management of finance. ඒ කියන්නේ ව්‍යාපාරික සාර්ථකත්වයට ව්‍යාපාරයේ fund management හොඳින් සිද්ධ වෙන්න ඕන. ව්‍යාපාරයේ නිර්මාණශීලී creativity එක තියෙන්න ඕන. employeesලා skillful වෙන්න ඕන. ඒ පැත්ත අපි හොයලා බලන්න ඕන. ව්‍යාපාරික සාර්ථකත්වයට customer ඉතාවදගත් customer satisfaction එක යාළගේ needs meet කරනවද? එයාලා ව්‍යාපාරයක කොයිතරම් බැඳීමක් තියෙනවද මේ පැත්ත අපි හොයලා බලන්න ඕනේ. ඊට අමතරව ව්‍යාපාරයේ internal business processes හොඳින් manage වෙනවද, හොඳින් efficiently work කරනවාද කියලා අපිට හොයලා බලන්න. මේ සියලුම පැතිකඩයන්ගේ performance measure වෙනවා නම් in addition to financial performance, if we can measure all these aspects, then we can say that is the very perfect or nearly perfect a holistic approach to measure the performance. Right. So according lamai අපි කලින් කතා කරපු conventional financial performance measurements method එක මේ කියන කාරණා නිසා criticize වෙනවා. එකක් තමයි financial indicators වල විතරක් පමණක් බර වීම, right? Being biased towards financial indicators, so it is highly criticized. That means accounting ratio analysis or financial approach to measure the performance usually criticized because it is only consider financial indicators and it's not a holistic approach. So these concepts already we discussed in the previous slides. So this is one of the suggested method to measure overall performance in of a firm. So මේ තියෙන ළමයි අපි කලින් කතා කරපු accounting ratio analysis method එකට අමතරව ඒක financial approach to measure the performance මේ තියෙන ළමයි balance scorecard approach කියන method එක to measure the performance, right, for the entire business organization by considering the whole success critical success factor. එතන මේ තියෙන ළමයි ව්‍යාපාරයක සාර්ථකත්වයට බලපාන සෑම ප්‍රධාන සාධකයක්ම මුල් කරගෙන මේ සෑම සාධකයකම සම්බන්ධ කරගෙන performance measure කිරීම තමයි මේ balance scorecard method එක වෙන්නේ. So you can keep or consider this balance scorecard method as the holistic approach to measure the organizational performance. Right? ව්‍යාපාරයක organizational performance measure කරන්න මේ සමස්ත organizational performance measure කරන්න අපි පාවිච්චි කරන method එකක් ලෙස ගන්න පුළුවන් balance scorecard. ඒකෙන් වල පේනවා financial aspect අපි සුපුරුදු පරිදි measure කරනවා using gross profit margin, net profit margin, return on equity, asset turnover. අපි දැන් කතා කරපු සියලුම ratios වලින් අපිට measure කරන්න පුළුවන් whether we are managing our finance or achieving our financial objectives well. In addition, we need to check, right, whether our internal business operations are doing well. Right? Whether our internal business operations are effective, efficient, they are minimizing waste, minimizing right the time, waste and efforts. Right? We can measure our internal business process. Right? ඒතර ව්‍යාපාරයේ සාර්ථකත්වයට financial indicators විතරක් මදි. සාර්ථකත්වයේ මනින්න අපිට බලන්න ඕන we are කොච්චර efficientද අපේ waste කොච්චර minimize වෙනවද production processing time එක කොච්චර අඩු කරගෙන තිබෙනවද right ඒ වගේ දේවල් අපිට හොයන්න පුළුවන් මේ internal business process perspective related performance measurements ආරගෙන. In addition, learning and growth මේක සාමාන්‍ය ළමයි ව්‍යාපාරයේ employees හා සම්බන්ධ intellectuals skills වලට සම්බන්ධ දෙයක්. So මේ learning and growth අපි බලන්නේ employees ලා කොයිතරම් skillful ද they are whether they are creative enough, right, whether they are training and develop over the period and add value to the business, right. ඒ තුنين අපිට ඒක අපි දන්නවා ව්‍යාපාරයේ සාර්ථකත්වයට employees ලාගේ skills අතිශය වැදගත්, employees ලාගේ creativity එක අතිශය වැදගත්, employees ලාගේ growth එක අතිශය වැදගත්, employees ලාගේ training developments ඒ සියල්ල ව්‍යාපාරයේ සාර්ථකත්වයට වැදගත්. අන්න ඒ පැතිකඩය හා සම්බන්ධ performance අපි measure කරනවා. For example, how many training and development workshops we conducted, how many new innovative concepts we developed. Right? Those are indicators, not the GP margin only, not the return on equity ratio only, right? Return on equity, GP margin, these ratios merely can't measure the overall performance. අපිට බලන්න ඕන employees ලා කොච්චරක් නව නිෂ්පාදන හොයාගෙන තියෙනවද. ඒක financial indicator නෙවෙයි. employees ලා අලුතෙන් patent right කීයක් අපි apply කරලා තියෙනවා company විසින්. ඒවා financial indicators නෙවෙයි, but important for the business success. How many training and development programs we conducted, right? It is non-financial, but important for the business success, right? So accordingly, these are non-financial performance indicators. As far as customers are concerned, you know, customer is the king. Ultimately, customer is the one who uh, right generate cash flows for the business. Customer ගේ වියදම් කරන සල්ලි තමයි අපිට ආදායම වෙන්නේ. So accordingly, customer ගේ පැත්තෙන් අපි performance measure කරන්න ඕන. For example, let's say how many complaints customer pays, right? Minimizing the delivery time, minimizing the customer complaints, right? How many new customers join to the business, right? Once a customer join with the firm or the connected with the company, how many times, how many of them are repeating with the company, right? Repeating purchase of the company. Then customer loyaltiness to the business, so we can measure. Customer complaints මගින් අලුතෙන් add වෙච්ච customers ලා මගින් waiting times අඩු කිරීම මගින් විවිධ ක්‍රම මගින් අපිට පුළුවන් customer related perspectives අපිට measure කරන්න, right? ඒකෝල ළමයි මේ හැම ආකාරයකම performance indicators and measurements අවශ්‍යයි. ව්‍යාපාරයේ සමස්තයක් ලෙස performance measure කරන්න P&L එකේ and balance sheet පාවිච්චි කළා එන profit ratio, net profit ratio, return on equity ratio වගේ ratios වලින් පමණක් ව්‍යාපාරික performance measure කරන්න බෑ. මේ හැම පැතිකඩයක්ම ආවරණය වෙන පරිදි performance measure කිරීමට අපි කියනවා holistic approach to measure performance. එතකොට මේක දැන් කතා කරපු අනෙකුත් ratios අපි කියනවා non performance measurement, non-financial performance indicators. For example, number of customer complaints. As far as customer perspective is concerned, it is a non-financial performance indicator. Number of new product concept developed, number of new patents applied, now number of innovative concept developed, they are learning and growth concepts, performance indicator. Let's say production processing time decrease කරපු percentage එක එහෙම නැත්නම් let's say product processing time decrease කරපු percentage එක එවැනි ratios වලින් අපිට පුළුවන් internal business process perspective එක මනින්න මේ වගේ විවිධ ක්‍රම වලින් අපිට පුළුවන් ළමයි non performance indicators වලින් ව්‍යාපාරයේ holistic idea ගන්න performance measure කරන්න. So accordingly, only financial performance indicators are not adequate. We need to consider other non-financial performance indicators as well. Okay, Lamai, that's it. These are the conclusion. You can have a look at these conclusions. So, right, concluding points. It covers all what we have discussed so far. So, wish you all the best for your exams. Accordingly, as far as your exam is concerned, right, don't worry about the calculation part of the account ratios. It is just very low level learning skill. It is important. If you are given the information about the ratios, you should be able to interpret what are the consequences, then what are the strategies, then give the appropriate advices to the manager, right? So it is not it won't be a challenging task, right? If you understood these concepts well, I'm sure you can easily tackle the examination questions well. Wish you all the best. Good luck to your examination. And again, okay, thanks for watching. Wish you all the best for your exam.